Hi, good morning. Thanks, Arvind, for that lead-in. This is my first event at the Digital India Forum Foundation, and I was very delighted to hear that today's focus is all about creativity and create for India. There's been a lot of discussion, debate these days in the media around artificial intelligence, and you have these leading lights, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, who have been further advancing this debate on should we fear the algorithms, should we fear the machines. And when we look at the global scenario, right, you have the United States, China, who have been racing ahead in the AI space. Not a day goes by, reading news about how the machines are taking over, how automation is taking place. People are talking of dark factories where robots can do everything and there's no need to even turn on the lights and so on. And we're already seeing it, how automation is impacting every aspect of our lives. And this is something I wrote about the paper that you referred to for Carnegie. This was last year on what is happening in the artificial intelligence space and where is India, right? Are we anywhere in the picture? What will it take for us to catch up and so on? Given that so much has been done by countries like China, where their own search engines like Baidu have created a lot of native technology. They've had people like Andrew Ng from Stanford come and work for them. So they've got a head start. And when I look at this forum, I think you are actually now thinking beyond the algorithmic economy, right? Because ultimately what the algorithms and automation will get us is probably an immense amount of efficiency. But what will make that difference is the creativity, the ingenuity of the human mind. So maybe we may not catch up with China on the artificial intelligence or automation front, but let us create the future with creativity and the whole creative economy. So in that sense, it's a very futuristic forum, and very happy to be here. One of the things that I see in the way the technology world has evolved, right? Today, a lot of the big firms are largely algorithm driven, and a lot of their business models are rooted in this automation, be it Uber, be it Airbnb, Amazon, all your recommendations on YouTube, how Netflix directs you towards the content that it thinks is most of interest to you, and so on. So that's the algorithm world. But if you look back since the late 90s, there's a certain trend that we see in the global economy, right? First, it was Chinese manufacturing, and it was driving down costs, and that forced a whole lot of efficiency into various industries as a global phenomenon. And I remember this one paper that McKinsey had put out at that time, saying that it's not just the Chinese manufacturing bringing down cost, but it was also the Walmart phenomenon, which was driving efficiencies in global supply chains. And that was also forcing a lot of this efficiency. So that was one wave that we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then you had the e-commerce wave. And e-commerce driving a lot of efficiency in the way retail operates, disrupting business models, bringing in a whole new set of players with Amazon and so on. So that was the second wave of change in the global economy. And then you had digital ecosystems, right? With Apple creating an entire ecosystem. It was no longer about one portal or one storefront, but it was an entire ecosystem encompassing devices, platforms, and creating a whole lifestyle around them. And Apple was one good example. Nike is another good example where you don't have to be a technology company to create a whole digital ecosystem around your brand and your products, right? Embedding sensors into the shoes and then having apps that can pick that data and then creating an entire lifestyle around fitness and so on. So digital ecosystems was the second way which brought in change and disrupted many things. And then, of course, the most recent is AI and algorithms and the change that they brought in. So I feel that the next wave of change will be creativity, because the algorithms will only get you this far. So that's what makes the topic that all of you will be deliberating upon through the course of the day. It's so important that the edge, the cutting edge in the global economy will come from creativity. And we have the talent pool, the human resources to get that edge, but then we have to rise up to that occasion, rise up to the challenge. We are uniquely poised on, to be able to do that. We are the largest democracy, the youngest democracy, and we have something that China will probably not have in our lifetimes, which is freedom of expression. And that places us at a very unique advantage for creativity and creating a whole new business model, disruption around creativity. But then we have to get our act right, and some of the points that Arvind touched upon, get to the heart of that debate. I don't have a whole lot of the numbers that he was throwing, but I will at least talk to this subject from the way I see it. So we in India have, apart from the demographic uniqueness, which puts us at an advantage in this space, we also have a very rich tradition and history, right, of creativity. And we've given the world so many things over the centuries, be it Sanskrit as a language, be it yoga, be it a whole lot of content that has been created in this country, the epics, the stories and the storytelling traditions and so on. So there's a whole lot of heritage to look back at. But then how do we bring it to this modern era, and especially in an era where technology is so important, the world is so globalized. And one of the examples that comes to mind is Bahubali and its success across the world, right? I think it has shown us that Indian creativity has a global market. If we think big, we don't limit our aspirations. I think it's a great example. Similarly, Dangal, the way it did so well in China. So there's a market out there both in India and outside for Indian creativity. But the question is, how do we rise up to the challenge? And what role can the public broadcaster play? Right? Now, if you look at the television space, very interesting. When we all grew up, it was, one channel monopoly of Doordarshan. There's a lot of debate in recent weeks since we announced this logo contest, where we said, maybe it's time to think of a new logo for Doordarshan. But then we made sure that we said, there's a lot of nostalgia around the Doordarshan brand, because to a whole generation that grew up with it, they still identify with that logo, even if they don't watch the channel even once for months at a go. But then we said the logo should also reflect the aspirations of a new India, right? Because this young country, many of them are children of liberalization. Their earliest memories are not of Doordarshan, they're of multiple channels. How do we make this brand relevant to them? How do we connect with them? So we said, let's do a logo contest. Let's crowdsource ideas. Now, many people said, why should you crowdsource ideas? Why can't you just hire professionals? But I think the crowdsourcing has a certain appeal to it, that it democratizes the whole process by which we can tap into the creative talent across India. Now, of course, the final logo will necessarily involve professionals to work on it. But at least let's source the ideas from a much larger population. So that was the thought process behind it. And this democratization has happened through Doordarshan in multiple ways. One good example is free dish. If you look at the way television measurement, audience measurement was done in India for a long time, it was largely focused on the big cities, the metros. And then there were a whole lot of issues around that. Was that the right way to do it and so on. In parallel, another phenomenon was happening, which is free-to-air channels. So Doordarshan had put out a platform of about 80 free-to-air, DTH channels that anyone can receive if they have the set-top box and an antenna. And these free-to-air channels would cater to a population which is to them subscribing to a cable package or buying a pay channel only DTH is kind of expensive and so on. Now there was no measurement, there was no estimate of how large this market was. Now some reports say it's about 20 million households that have these free dish set-top boxes. Now on the other hand, with audience measurement, you had BARC coming in, and they expanded their samples to now measure the rural population as well. And you have a very unique phenomenon. If you go look at, they have a mobile app, the BARC, so anyone can look at the TV ratings, every cycle that they put out data. And it's kind of interesting. When you look at the top 10 channels, across genres, across languages, across all formats, right? You have 3 to 4 free-to-air channels, which are in the top 10. And these free-to-air channels don't run the fresh content. They're running older episodes, episodes which are 6 months old, maybe a year old, and so on. So there's a huge market out there for creative content that was not tapped all these years. And they're so hungry that they don't care if they're not seeing the latest episode of Tarak Mehta. They're happy if they watch a 6-month-old episode. And those episodes are getting far more viewership than the flagship channel. So what Freedish and the BARC data have shown us is that there's a big mass market for creative content. And I think that's what the point that Arvind was making earlier, that, can we tap into this? Can we fill those pipes with creative content? So that is one example. Another interesting example I have to share is around this whole debate around English news TV. Since this upstart TV channel came up, there's been a lot of debate, a lot of heartburn probably, between the bigger guys and the startup on, who has the market share. And then we put out an interesting infographic saying that, you guys are fighting amongst yourselves, but the largest audience for English TV news is on DD News and not with any of you guys. And that is kind of interesting because together they don't even account for even 50% of the market, while we had a much bigger audience base. Now, it's a bilingual channel. Of course, people watch it. Some parts of the day they watch Hindi news, some parts of the day they watch English news. So what we did is we looked at the segments where English news is aired and what was the audience for those segments. And then we compared the corresponding time bands, and we were the largest. And now this is not something that people across the country know. Again, it's a pointer to how big the market is and how narrow the focus has been on the urban audience, while the real potential for creative content in India is the rural India, and especially the languages, people wanting to watch in the languages of their native tongue. It is stunning when I look at BARC data that across genres, the top channel is Sun TV, not any of your Hindi channels, not any of the English channels. And that just tells you the biggest market is actually native languages. So these are some things to think about when you look at what is the future for creating a content economy or a creative economy. And one of the areas that we are thinking about as a public broadcaster is to not look at our channels as an end touch point with the consumer, but as a platform where the TV channel is one way of interacting with the citizens. Mobile apps, the website, YouTube. Look at a whole range of ways in which we can reach them, where, let's say, take the example of DD Kisan. So DD Kisan need not just be a channel, it can be a platform for farmers, giving them information that they need. Because our viewing habits are no longer linear. And if you take a farmer, his viewing habits cannot be linear because he has to go to the farm. So he needs a non-linear way of getting the content that he needs. So I can't just think of DD Kisan as just a channel, it has to be a platform. So that's a big change that we will have to work on as a public broadcaster. Another opportunity, and I think this is waiting to be tapped, is convergence, and it's already starting to happen in the United States, where the terrestrial broadcasters there have realized that in the battle between on-demand, cable, and DTH, they sort of lost out. So now they are plotting a comeback, and their comeback is mobile TV chips embedded inside cell phones and convergence. Because to me as a consumer, it doesn't matter if my content is coming through the internet on Facebook, or through 3G or 4G, through broadband, or if it's coming on the broadcast channels. So what if I have the ability to create channels on demand using the broadcast spectrum and deliver it straight to the mobile phones without eating up your data plans, without choking the telecom networks? I mean, that's a huge opportunity. And so there's a new standard in the United States, it's called ATSC 3.0, where they are experimenting with this. Now that's something for us to learn from and maybe build some leadership. Today, digital terrestrial TV in India, we have about 19 cities where we have transmitters that are putting out a signal that probably nobody is watching because we have not created this ecosystem. So for this creative economy to thrive, we have to create an ecosystem. It's not just limited to content. It's not just limited to the pipe. We have to have the right devices. We have to have the right incentives for this entire ecosystem to come together, make it a win-win situation. And a key part of this will be, can mobile phones of the future have an embedded chip that can get an FM signal, that can get a digital terrestrial TV signal, and completely insulate the end consumer experience from a convergence standpoint, where I don't care where the stream is coming from. The live stream could be coming from the internet, or it could be coming on the TV signal. I don't really care, as long as I get the experience that I want. So that's another opportunity that's up for grabs. One last point I wanted to make is, don't just limit the thought process to creating for India. I think we should think beyond that. Think create in India. Because if you look at a lot of the societies, the Western societies, they have a graying population. And they are also grappling with immigration and other issues. A lot of the creative traditions of those societies will over time have a very dwindling population that is going to sustain them, advance them to the next generation and so on. So that's another opportunity, because we have the talent pool, we have the resources. So maybe some of these creative vistas can actually have centers of excellence in India. And we produce this content for the world in the future. So that's another opportunity. So don't just limit it to creating for India, but also create in India for the rest of the world. So that's another thing to think about. So in conclusion, I'm kind of optimistic about the future, because I know there's this big battle, big debate, between the mind and machines and what will happen. But I think creativity will eventually triumph. We have all these movies like Matrix, which paint a very dark picture of what the future of the world will look like, with machines taking over and so on. But I think the future will be far more benign. I don't think it will be that dark. I think artificial intelligence will empower us. It will help us overcome our handicaps, our shortcomings. Maybe it will unlock new vistas of human creativity, new ways of expressing our imagination. If you come to think of it, few centuries back, when the Mahabharata was probably composed, it was all oral tradition and retention in memory, because those were the only two means by which they could express themselves and capture that imagination and creativity. And then over the years, you had writing, you had print, then digital. So maybe there'll be new ways in which our imagination can be captured, expressed, and shared. And the algorithms will enable that. But then ultimately, it is our thought process, our mind at work. So I think so the future is bright for creativity, and we are uniquely poised in the world to be the engine of this creative economy. So I wish all the very best to this forum. I'm hoping there'll be some path-breaking ideas that will emerge from here, and we will create the content economy, creative economy of the future in India for the rest of the world. Thank you.